thing we have to fear is
in war.
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. And David, we've got a topic that we've covered quite a bit over the last few months. It's one that I know we've gotten upset or frustrated with our government in some areas, but this was one that really got both of us very concerned, not only for the family that's involved and was the victim of really tyranny in their government here, but for families all across the country, that the state could actually be powerful enough to take your child, kidnap your child from you, and keep your child from you for 15, 16 months, and you only get to go see your child once a week. That's how bad this case was. And so we've fortunately had the attorney on that's dealt with it several times, and when we get him on here in a few minutes, we're going to hear some good news.
Yeah, we are going to hear some good news. This has been going 16 months now, and Matt Staver is the guy who got into this, but he didn't get into it until about 2 months ago. It was about 13 and a half months when finally we got word of how bad this was and finally got a hold of Matt. And the good thing about Matt is he's offensive-minded.
Yeah.
And so the attorney that had been representing the family for those 13 and a half months was not offensive-minded. You know, they were kind of, well, whatever the judge says and whatever. No, it's time to go push the boundaries around and make some noise on this and put sunlight on it. And Matt stepped in, and they were so scared of Matt, they never did allow him to speak before the court.
Wouldn't even allow him to be the attorney for the family, saying, this is the guy we want. He's licensed to practice. Right. He can be in this court, and they wouldn't even allow him to.
And the state went in and said, oh, no, look at this guy. He's been to the Supreme Court. He's argued on marriage.
Look how many times he's won.
He's effective. We can't have this guy. And I mean, the judge kept him, would not let the family have the attorney they wanted, would not let him represent the child. And like Matt said, the first time in his history, he's dean of a law school. He's done how many Supreme Court cases, done how many states, how many federal courts and state courts he's argued in. First time he's never been allowed to represent the people who wanted him to represent them. So the good news is that it is good news. We finally have a degree of closure on this. And so since this just happened, just a matter of just a couple of days ago, we thought good time to get an update from Matt and hear from him just now what's happened.
Matt Staver with Liberty Counsel with us when we return here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. As Christians become more active in politics, they must remember to elevate principles above party loyalty. Perhaps the best illustration of this comes from the life of Founding Father Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence who served in the presidential administrations of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, each of whom was from a different political party. When Benjamin Rush was asked of his personal party affiliation, he responded, "I've been alternately called an aristocrat and a Democrat. I am neither. I am a Christocrat. I believe all power will fail of producing order and happiness in the hands of man. He alone who created and redeemed man is qualified to govern him." Like Benjamin Rush, we too must remain Christocrats regardless of our personal party affiliation.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our good friend Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel is with us now. And Matt, I think you got some good news for our listeners.
We do. Justina Pelletier has now been returned to her mom and dad, Linda and Lou Pelletier. This is great developments that have taken place in this case. 16 months of a nightmarish existence has now come to an end. 16 months ago, she was a competitive figure skater, and she was attending private school. And then she walked into Boston Children's Hospital at the where she was taken there by her family at the suggestion of her treating physician across town at Tufts Medical Center. And that's when it all started. And Boston Children's Hospital wanted to give her a psychological diagnosis rather than a medical diagnosis. And DCF stepped in, took their side, and they said if the parents want to treat her medically, it's got to be medical abuse. We're going to take the child. And so they stopped the medical treatment, and she went from competitive figure skater to where she is today, confined to a wheelchair, and she is physically weak. Much of her hair is falling out because of the lack of treatment and the abuse. So she's got a long way to go to recover spiritually, emotionally, physically, educationally. She hasn't had education in 2 years nearly. But the good news is she's home, and she's back with her mom and dad, and she will sleep in her bed for the first time in 16 months.
Matt, you've dealt with some of the biggest cases in our country, Supreme Court, done all kinds of things. I don't know if I've seen you as frustrated as you were with this particular case. I mean, you hit a brick wall for a while there with the state of Massachusetts.
We did. I'm telling you, this was very frustrating. I've encountered things in this case I've never encountered before. It's like, do we really live in this country? Is this really America? It can't be happening, but here it is. It is happening. This family, they live in a nice home in Connecticut. They don't even live in Massachusetts. They've got 4 daughters. Justina is the youngest. They're all a great family. They love each other. It's an intact family, been married for many, many years, and all the children love each other and the parents and so forth. This is not a bad family, and they're giving their daughter the best medical care from a highly reputable physician, world-renowned, at a highly reputable institution. At his direction, they take her to Boston Children's Hospital so that she can see a GI specialist who had just gone there, who had transferred from Tufts to Boston Children's. And, you know, they think, well, they're going to go there and get the doctor that she had seen before, that she was familiar with for her GI complaints or GI distress, and then we'll be able to get her back home and she'll be going back to school and, you know, life will continue to go on good as usual. And they get into this nightmare. I mean, they walk into a buzzsaw. No one would have foreseen this happening. And yet the problem is what we found is this seems to be more standard at Boston Children's Hospital than most people realize. This is not the only family it happened to, but we've also heard calls from people around the country that have had very similar stories, and I think it may be arising from the so-called nanny state mentality that the state is the parent, and they know better than mom and dad the well-being and the treatment and the plans and the future of your children.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the attitude. The state knows best, and parents are stupid, and they're not going to do what's best for their. It's just a wrong-headed mentality. I mean, every parent wants to do what's best for their child, and here you had 2 parents that, I mean, they were invested in this emotionally, spiritually. They were doing everything they could to help their daughter, and then she's essentially kidnapped by the state. As I recall, when you first came on about this a few months ago, she was getting, 1 hour a week with her parents?
Yeah, she was getting 1 hour of supervised visitation a week. She was getting a 20-minute telephone call, and they would count down the minutes remaining on the call, and then they would click it up the receiver so that it would stop in the middle of a sentence if you were not finished. It was brutal. And 3 months ago, in March, Judge Johnston actually awarded permanent custody to that kind of unbelievable incarceration. Permanent custody. It was devastating for the family, and it was disheartening. But we continued to work night and day through the weekends until where we are now, 180-degree turnaround. Literally, we filed a number of legal pleadings and procedures. We negotiated with the top people. We held them accountable, called them to account. We worked with different parties. We met with state legislators and federal legislators. And the people around the country heard about this case, and they made their voice known to Boston Children's Hospital and to DCF and to Governor Duval Patrick, I should say. And a miraculous turnaround of events has rapidly come together in the last few weeks.
It's a huge, huge victory, Matt. I cannot imagine that family, if it hadn't been for Liberty Counsel and for you being able to jump in immediately, and it's just a huge blessing for them, but also a wake-up call for the whole country. And you want to be prepared to fight against this kind of thing. You got to support organizations like Liberty Counsel. So, folks, I encourage you to go to lc.org, find out more, get on their email list, find out what you can do to help them be as strong as they possibly can and always be in a position to help families like this. Matt, last thing, what about what we can do to stop this from happening in the future? What do you recommend? We're excited this good news is here, but we want to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Well, we have a law that we drafted, and we're calling it Justina's Law, and we're urging state legislators to pass it. And it would address this very thing so that this kind of thing would not ever happen again. And unfortunately, what we found is it's more common than it's commonly understood. And what we've seen, even from the medical professionals, is that there's a term that's being used unofficially called parentectomy. Basically, like you have a tonsillectomy, you remove your tonsils. Let's just remove the parent from this child's treatment, and let's do our own thing and forget about what they want to do. That cuts to the very heart of our parents' rights and our families. And you can see the devastating results in the case here, 16 months of separation. So that's one way. We have that available at Liberty Counsel. You can call us or go to our website at lc.org. But it's a Justina's Law, and we want to get that passed in all 50 states.
Yeah, huge. That you don't want to have in your backyard. You better get involved and help make this happen. lc.org is where you can go to find out more. Matt, God bless you, brother. We're so thankful for you and your entire team, and I know that family is very thankful for you, but we're just glad to know you're out there on the front lines. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good to be with you.
That's Matt Staver with Liberty Counsel. Back in a moment with David Barton.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Often today, it seems that the federal government has become too intrusive into local matters, and federal micromanagement has now unfortunately become the norm in education, law enforcement, religious expressions, and even on what is and is not moral. Strikingly, the Founding Fathers had intended that the federal government never intrude into any of these issues. As Thomas Jefferson explained, taking from the states the moral rule of their citizens and subordinating it to the federal government would break up the foundations of the Union. I believe the states can best govern our home concerns and the federal government our foreign ones. According to Thomas Jefferson, the original plan was for the federal government to direct foreign affairs, but for the states and local communities to direct the domestic and the moral ones.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Special thanks to Matt Staver and David. I know he's getting bombarded with interviews right now because this was a big national coverage deal, so really appreciate him taking time to update us on the case. But it's great that she's back with her family, but man, what an ordeal. And like I was telling Matt, how do we keep other families from having to go through this?
Well, hopefully some won't have to go through because of what Matt's about to do.
Yeah.
What he did not talk about is that this battle has just started. Oh, wait a minute. Justina's home. No. That's only the first step. And by the way, just a little aside commentary here. Welcome to Obamacare. You can keep your physician if you want your physician.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, my tough
You can't
doctor,
even keep your daughter in this case.
Well, they had the physicians they wanted. The physician told them where to go to get treatment. They went there for that GI guy, and a little rookie steps in who's been now for 7 months a doctor of some type and says, "Oh, I know more than all the experts, and I'm going to be your doctor." So your choice on your doctor and where you want to be, no, you don't get that. Well, now they finally get back to it, but how many national stories has it taken? How many stories in the Boston newspapers? How many stories on national networks has it been before they finally...
How many rallies? How much press? I mean,
and think about how many people will not get these national stories.
That's right.
You know, how many people are under... And
most of the time this stuff happens, and you have no one helping you.
You bet.
And it's desperation.
And see, Romney Care, we knew Romney Care was the precursor to Obamacare. And this is where it came from, and Obama credited Romney with being the first one to do it, and this is what it looks like when you get it. This is not good news. So you have that, and I'll tell you the other thing that Sunlight has brought out is the incompetency of this agency. I forget the exact numbers, but it's somewhere. Now, this agency that took Justina, and we've already covered on previous programs that when you become a ward of the state, they specifically, by state regulations and law, allow you to use medical experimentation on wards of the state. And so, you know, they started seeing all these incisions popping up on her stomach that had nothing to do with what was going on. What's that? And so, medical experimentation, you really, in this day and age, that's what we, but of course we can't do it on animals because we got the animal rights activists, so we can do it on humans instead.
Not just in this day and age, in this country?
In
our country?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's crazy stuff. So the incompetency here, as I recall, there's about 160 kids with Massachusetts DCF that have either died in their possession or are missing. I think there's about 95 kids they still can't account for. Now, if you had just any orphanage and 3 kids died in that orphanage, they would have it shut down in 24 hours. And we're talking about 160 kids here in state control. That means you have an unaccountable state agency, absolutely unaccountable. And they had this judge, and this is the judge that released Justina and let her go home is the same judge that took her away from her parents, made her a ward of the state, and that would not let Matt be the attorney. Now, what's happened in the last 2 months? Sunlight, bro, sunlight.
Yeah.
And this judge is now getting his brains beat in with all these stories on what he want permit. And so he signed the order, and Matt Staver is the one who wrote out the order that this judge signed. So, we've gone through 2 more months. Now, the good news with what's happening with this is Matt is now going to make people pay for this. This is not the end of it.
Not just going to say, okay, we got her home, thanks, see you later. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again by making the ones that did it pay for it.
You and I talk about this all the time, that in politics you have to hang a scalp up occasionally and say, that's you. This is you. And so Matt is going to do that. He's going to have a coup stick, and he's going to count some coup here. He would not talk about it while this case is ongoing because that would only make the other guys get more recalcitrant and scared what might happen. So we can't let go of this girl. We got to keep him out. Now that she's back home, look out. Because Matt's going after some individual people and some agencies to make them accountable.
They ought to be held accountable.
And they ought to be held accountable. Now, this is the other thing that becomes difficult here. I'm engaged in a thing right now on the cowboy world where we're at Congress trying to hold a renegade USDA agency accountable. And this USDA agency has been taken over by HSUS, which is Humane Society of the United States, which is one of the most animal rights activist groups out there.
Oh, yeah.
And this particular agency is wanting to shut down all horse shows and all domesticated horses in the United States. The Department of Agriculture agency wants horse shows. They tried to shut down rodeos and couldn't do that. They've tried to shut down circuses, couldn't do that. They've tried to shut down puppies, the breeding of puppies. They couldn't do that. They're going after all these groups, and they finally found a particular aspect of the horse industry that doesn't have a big lobby. Now, it does involve hundreds of thousands of horses. It's a $6.4 billion industry, but they're cowboys. Why do they need lobbyists? Well, because they don't have lobbyists, they are now finding what it means to have an unaccountable agency.
When you think government doesn't affect you, get ready.
That's right.
They're coming to your backyard.
And that's what they've done. And so what these bureaucrats are telling these cowboys is, sue us. We don't care. We lose all the time. We can outlast you. You don't have enough money to sue us all the time. And they openly acknowledge that they lose all their cases in court, but they don't care because the government prints money, and you can't fire them, and no matter how many cases they lose, you can't. Well, when you get that mentality, you got to change something.
Yeah.
And unless you can get to those guys personally or make it hurt their pocketbook, and that's what Matt's going to do. He's going to go after their pocketbook.
All right, let's find out how. Stay with us on WallBuilders Live. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at WallBuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Dave, as we went to break, you were talking about holding bureaucrats accountable, basically holding government accountable for these abuses. So,
well, let me tell you the attitude of government even on being accountable.
Yeah.
You would think that the VA scandal, which got everybody angry, would cause some change in accountability. And so what happened was the U.S. House identified instantly, promptly, a bunch of the supervisors over those responsible for getting these guys killed, literally, for giving them no treatment.
There was enough outrage that people zeroed in on who's actually responsible.
Who's responsible. And so what it is these guys are federal employees, which means that they have eternal life here on earth, and they cannot be fired, essentially. And so the House promptly passed a bill that allowed the firing of incompetent supervisors who had done the responsible for these people who did the death stuff. Went right through the House. I think it was something like 390 to 30. I think was the vote on it. You know, some massive number. Harry Reid refuses to take it up in the Senate. He does not want them to be accountable for what they did to those VA guys.
I'm sitting here thinking, as you described the bill passing the House, I'm thinking, we should have done this a long time ago. Why do you have to pass a law to hold people accountable? It's crazy that they have the protections that they have in their bureaucracies. And then you tell me it was enough for the House to do it, but you still have a senator that's refusing to hold them accountable.
Well, take the accountability thing for a minute. Let me just read you some things, because what happens is government people are nearly impossible to fire, and that doesn't matter whether it's the state or the local or the federal level. They get all the civil service protection. They get all the protection like Harry Reid gives them, particularly at the federal level. Let me just take you through some stats on how unaccountable government is. And when you're this unaccountable, and you know you are, you say exactly what those guys told the Cowboys: sue us. We lose all the time. You don't have enough money or time to outlast us. Let me just go through people who are still on government payrolls. All right, I'm going to take a list from Connecticut. Here's from Connecticut. Former juvenile probation officer Richard Staub was convicted of sexually assaulting underage boys he oversaw. He still gets $55,000 annually.
We're still paying him
$55,000 annually. He's convicted of sexual assault of underage boys. Let's go to former Connecticut Governor John Rowland. Spent 10 months in prison for corruption. Still gets $50,000 annually. Let's go to former state representative Jefferson Davis. He's on the state's sex offender registry for conviction of sexual activity with a young boy. $6,000 annually. Former state senator Ernest Newton served prison time for pleading guilty to accepting a bribe. $8,000 annually. I mean, I just go down the list. Don't you think there's crimes strenuous enough that government, which means we the taxpayers, probably shouldn't be under?
Can I just throw one more out at you?
Yeah.
The rubber rooms.
Oh, that's my next one.
Is that what you're going?
Here it is.
Go for it.
All right, I'm quoting here. In New York City, some 800 government payroll employees, educators, they're, quote, accused of breaking rules, abusing kids, or simply failing to provide students with a decent education, will be paid a stunning $22 million by the city this year for doing absolutely nothing. These incompetent, lawless teachers are kept in the infamous rubber rooms where as many as 800 teachers languish, sometimes for years, awaiting disciplinary hearings.
I don't even know what to say to that. I mean,
what you say is let Matt Staver get at him.
Yes.
And so this
stop the insanity.
Stop the insanity.
I read one of those teachers 13 years.
Yes.
And it was one of these molestations.
And it's because it's easier for the government to pay them than go through all the process of getting them fired through civil service.
Because the unions have stacked the deck.
That's right.
They've made it so difficult.
That's right.
To fire even the bad employees.
And you know, if private businesses want to have a union, that's fine. But government employees should never have a union, ever.
FDR even said that.
Because they're unaccountable.
Roosevelt said, don't unionize
If you're going to be
employees.
a servant to the people, and that's what government's supposed to be, is you got to be accountable to the people.
Yeah.
And so I'm thrilled with what Matt's doing now. The hard thing is getting immunity, because Did you know to sue the government has to give you permission to sue itself?
Yeah, getting past the immunity.
Yeah, you have to get past the immunity because the government gives all of its employees immunity, so you have to get the government to give you an exception to sue an employee, but there's other ways of getting there. And so Matt, who is, obviously Dean of Liberty Law School, who's been in the court how many hundreds of times, and so he's... Well, you'll see what's coming.
It's their worst nightmare.
Yeah, that's right.
I think this is not where they wanted to go with this thing. And even when you think about how poorly he was treated when he first stepped in and wanted to participate, I bet you some of those judges and bureaucrats are going to think, maybe we shouldn't have been so hard on this guy from Liberty.
Well, hopefully what happens is the collusion with state employees and state judges backs off. Yeah. Because these judges, once stuff started coming to light, they're saying, wait a minute, DCF, that's not what you told us. DCF, wait a minute, you told us that this girl was being medically abused. That's not what's happening here. And so the judge, I think, really has seen the light because he only got the side of what the DCF said.
So you're talking about the whole system of the courts just rubber stamping what these agencies do.
The courts rubber stamp what the agencies, because they think the agencies are the experts. That the agencies come in and say, oh, this parent's incompetent. I'll bet you this judge now asked for the rest of the information before he believes what DCF tells him again. Yeah. So that's the good thing. And even DCF recognized that they were in trouble because they signed off on the order that Matt wrote to give Justina back to the parents. And they're the ones who fought this thing for 16 months. Yeah. And now they're signing off on what Matt's doing. So they've got a little fear on them, but it ain't nothing like what's going to be coming.
Hey, folks listening, we want to say thank you to you as well. You're a very active audience.
You were.
We know you made a lot of calls, and you got involved in this and helped this family. Now get involved in your home state and be a part of getting those parental rights legislation, the parental rights legislation passed in each of your individual states. Thanks for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand under